Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important conversation. And I'm so glad that you tuned in to Coffee with Clint. Again, I just want to express my thoughts and prayers for everyone who is fighting COVID 19 and how this may have affected your family. I know as the days goes on, it seems like it's hitting closer and closer to home, but we must not grow weary, and we must continue to follow the governor's recommendations. I'm so excited to have this very dynamic panel joining us this morning to help tackle this very tough issue when it comes to mental health. So we have an esteemed panel that we'll get to in just a few moments, but I want to encourage you, if you have questions, comments, or concerns, please place them in the respective comment box below, and we will make sure that we get to those. We may not get to every question or comment during this, but we are committed to responding. So go ahead and feel free during our broadcast today. If you have any questions, comments, and concerns, put them in the respective comment box below. Oftentimes, when the topic of mental health comes up in the room, it goes silent. But in my opinion, mental health is just as important as our physical health. And there are reports within the state of Michigan that we see that there is a rise in mental health and anxiety related disorders. And some reports have seen a very large spike in call volume. So, as I mentioned today, I have assembled a great panel to discuss mental health, and they will notify us about some resources that are available in our community that we can take advantage of. It's important that I connect with each and every one of you and hear your concerns as we move forward. And I would like to leave this conversation with a strong set of priorities and a very strong policy agenda to address the issues that we're speaking about today. Please know that the Clint Bryant campaign is your campaign, and we're focused on the issues that you bring to us so we can bring direct deliverables and action and elevate those issues. So during this conversation, please feel free to check out my priorities at clintbryant.com. And for our Spanish speaking community, you can go to es.clintbryant.com. Our website is translated in Spanish there. But I'm so pleased to be joined by an esteemed panel this morning. We have Dr. Jones from the United States Air Force Academy. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Jones. Also, we have Miss Wardine Talley from Saginaw County Community Mental Health Authority. We're pleased to have her join us. Also, we have Miss Dana Simmons from Wolverine Human Services. She's going to be joining us, as well as Sylvester Liggins from Guided Grace Family and Youth Services. So we're going to hop into our panel in just a moment, but I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Remember to put your comments and questions, concerns in the respective box below, and we'll make sure we get to them. But before we start, I'm going to see if we can get our panelists up. I wanted to know if one of them would like to lead us in a brief calming exercise before we get started, one that you might use day to day in your work in the mental health field. And be sure, just before we get started, to grab your coffee because that is definitely helping. This morning we have a beautiful day, and we're gonna tackle this very oftentimes tough subject to talk about, which is mental health. So please continue to put your comments, questions in below, and we will get to them in just a few moments. Again, we have Dr. Edward Jones.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Jones. How are you doing this morning?
Good. How about yourself?
Wonderful. We're doing well. Easing into the day. Thank you so much for joining our panel.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Next, we have Miss Wardine Talley.
including me in this conversation. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Wardine. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know we've had some experience working together
Yes.
in this field, and we know that with the issues that we're facing in the community, we know that mental health has been an ongoing issue and a struggle for some, and it's compounded with the flooding and COVID-19. So it means so much to me that we have a very dynamic panel, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Next, we have Miss Dana Simmons.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I'm thrilled and excited, and I'm also looking to learn more and more and give as much as I have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And finally on our panel this morning, we have Sylvester Liggins.
Hey, hello.
Good morning,
How you
Sylvester.
doing?
How are you?
I'm outstanding. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us from Guided Grace Family and Youth Services. We have a very well-rounded panel, and we're going to get into our discussion in a minute. I want to encourage all of our listeners this morning, if you have questions or comments, concerns, place them in the box, respective comment box, so we can get to them. This is a really important issue that we talk about in our community. So I'm going to start with one of the first questions that I have, and it is that mental health can be a very stigmatizing topic. But I would like to start our conversation by establishing some definitions. What is mental health? And then can you explain the difference between anxiety and depression? Let's start with Dr. Jones, please, if we could start with him.
I think he's
Oh,
on
Dr.
mute.
Jones, there we go. We got you. I think you're on mute.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So just to start, I would just say I think that, mental health has been considered to be very stigmatizing because people don't quite understand the concept. When we say mental health, there's always this negative stigma attached to, um, you know, psychotic features or a sense of feeling crazy or abnormal in some type of way. But um, it's really something that we need to be very mindful of. We often take care of ourselves physically, but psychologically, we don't think that that's a priority. And I think that's important for people to understand. There is a clinical level of anxiety and a clinical level of depression that people can experience that goes beyond just, feeling nervous or feeling a sense of sadness. And we have to be mindful. There are also some biological components that's connected to how we perform mentally. Various neurotransmitters that impact our chemicals in our brain. For example, this pandemic that we're experiencing, COVID, people respond differently. And when you think about trauma from a biological perspective, what typically happens is that we have these flood of hormones that run through our systems that sort of influence people to respond and act differently. We have to be mindful of that. So, from a mental health perspective, it's not something that we typically have control over. Things happen, and then these hormones flood, and our responses can be different. So it's important to kind of understand not just the psychological aspects of how we are from a mental health perspective, but as well as biologically.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Ms. Wardine.
I agree with everything Dr. Jones has said. I think that across the board, all populations, but particularly so in the African American community or people of color, it is considered a weakness that I'm out of control and kind of get it together. We're supposed to take care of everything and everyone and that. And one of my favorite sayings, I guess, is take care of you. Take care of you. And and it's seen as a weakness that I need to go and take a nap. It's almost like, geez, what's wrong with you? I know you said earlier when you started, Clint, and maybe we were all shy and kind of getting the dust out and that, but you said, what are some of the activities? What do we do to get our morning started, to get the day started? You don't just hop up and go. For some of us, it's a spiritual thing. We pray, we listen to music, we listen to a sermon. For other people, it may be an encouraging or motivational TED talk or something, but we must have that thing, that something that kind of gets me grounded and gets me going, every day, and then that, and repeat, lather, rinse, repeat. So at some point during the day, we need to take stock of what's going on. I think we may get to it later. I know our focus today is COVID-19. We may get to, I'm certain, because we're talking about trauma and mental health. We'll get to what is happening in this nation around us. And I have 4 children in 4 different cities. And I texted them last night to say, stay home, stay safe, and not because of COVID. I have a dear friend who coined a phrase, I guess he coined it. COVID has competition, baby. This whole, the police brutality and all of that. And we'll get to, perhaps there'll be time to talk about it later. But our mental health, our well-being, we can't tuck it away and pretend that it isn't a thing. We have to get help when we need it. And the more we learn, that's why I'm just really pleased that we're having this conversation this morning. And perhaps we can help the community, people we care about, to understand just the urgency of diagnosis, seeking help when you need it, finding little activities. And we'll talk more about it and share more as we go on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Ms. Wardine. Ms. Dana, the same question I want to pose to you, because this is such a stigmatizing topic, but I want to talk about mental health and what the difference is between anxiety and depression.
Well, anxiety is something that for a lot of the population that I work with, it often hits them really fast. And that depression is that state of mental being that is a progressive stage. Anxiety is often onset because of a situation or something going on right there, which can later on lead into a level of depression. But having a balance or understanding your mental state of well-being, oftentimes in the African American community, this is something that we're not taught. This has now become a learned understanding of what should be the thing that we do to balance our mental health. And I concur with what Dr. Jones says, and Ms. Talley. There's a lot of things that are composition that the definition between the two can be blurred based on situations and things. But as far as the mental health and your mental health wellness and understanding yourself and understanding, am I just anxious because I'm excited or I'm fearful of the unknown? And then that depression, is this been a prolonged situation? Again, one's more acute than the other. So yes. So as far as mental health is just, again, understanding, and like Wardine mentioned, the spiritual aspect of things, and as in our community, we mind, body, and soul. So it's the encompassing of that, and oftentimes that understanding, like I'm anxious to tell someone or to even share or open up and let people in to say, hey, I'm feeling a certain kind of way. I don't know what's going on, and asking for help to identify it. So a lot of times with mental health wellness and understanding the difference between anxiety and depression is knowing when to go and seek help and get someone to guide you through it and explain what's happening.
Mm. Thank you so much, Miss Dana. Mr. Liggins, is there anything that you would like to add to that when we talk about the difference between anxiety and depression?
Absolutely, and I thank you. I think that's a great question. Um, Personally, I believe that anxiety is nothing more than apprehension over what's about to happen or what could happen in the future, or your worried thoughts, or a belief that something could go wrong. Feelings like you need to run away or avoid things that could further spike anxiety. And depression is feelings of sadness about the future, as though hopeless, listlessness, or lacks of disbeliefs or positive things that can't occur. A little worry, but instead of certainly of future negative emotions, the anxiety is what spikes. They kind of work hand in hand, I would say. The anxiety will spike the depression for different emotions or from your thoughts, feelings, or emotions like suicidal ideation or self-harm, things like that. So I think with anxiety, we have to be more aware of the things that could go wrong and then get a handle on those things up front before the depression can even set in. So I agree with everybody on the panel when it comes to mental health, because our mental health, it includes our emotional and psychological, social well-being. So I kind of look at it like a triangle that's holding our equilibrium together. And I believe that our social component tilts the scale. We're not able to communicate openly and effectively, people start to maybe lose sleep, have
Hmm.
challenges with their appetite or dieting, and then we become more irritable,
Hmm.
less approachable, and then we start questioning our own mental component. So I just think it's the triangle from our emotions, our psychological, and our social well-being.
Hmm. Thank you so much. I want to talk a little bit about some of the protests that we've seen that have been going on in our state. We know we have a number of folks who are clamoring for the governor to reopen the state, but we also have folks who are anxious and are just not sure what that new normal might look like. And I wanted to ask this question: what role do you think that companies and managers have in meeting people where they are? If someone is watching this and thinking, I'm not ready to return back to my, do you think that they should advocate for themselves? And how do they do that? Let's start this question with Miss Wardine.
Thank you. It's a very good question. I think that get all of the details, all of the information from your HR department, um, the rules as things come together. For some of us, because we're all very unique and very different, it's hit harder for some. The fear, the angst, and as Sylvester mentioned, well, and the other panelists as well, a certain amount of anxiety is actually healthy. I should be able to, kind of take stock. Is this a
Mhm.
dangerous situation? So if there's a difference between my going back into the safety of mental health, where I have an office with a door, right, and our policy is there can't be two people in the office. That gives me
Mhm.
a degree of security, yes, but if I'm in a cubicle with 100
Mhm.
other people and they're not wearing masks, or if I'm in working a line where people are we're not 6 feet apart, and it, it's not a political thing. It is
Mhm.
proven scientifically that distance works. It just works. We can't
Mhm.
argue that, and that it is scientifically proven that keeping 6 feet or more, it works. Wearing a mask works. That is a
Mhm.
requirement of my
Mhm.
organization. You must
Mhm.
wear a mask when you're in a common area. So you see, I'm going back into a situation with a bit of anxiety, right? I'll keep,
Mhm.
if I were to sneeze right now, all of you would kind of glance around. It's just instinct now. And we're
Mhm.
live streaming. I'm nowhere near you. So there's a bit of anxiety associated with going back into these spaces. Um, and that's very real, and more so for some of us than others. So get all of the information, all of the details, the policy procedure of your organization,
Mhm.
FMLA, and so forth. Find out what you can do to keep yourself
Mhm.
safe. The essential workers, again, I've had the luxury, and it is a luxury, of working remotely for this entire experience since mid-March, I think. So it's time to go back. And for some of us, like I said, it produces a bit of anxiety, but that can be healthy when you keep it in perspective and you speak up. Yes, self-advocacy, speak up for yourself. Do not be afraid to look at your coworker and say, excuse me, and take a few steps back.
Mhm.
You have to take care of you. You have to go home to families and loved ones who may be compromised in one way or another. So going back to work, it is anxiety producing. Going back, out, they are going to open the economy. And whether you agree with that or not, open the businesses and that. Take care of you. And if you are in a situation where it's just not quite what you feel it needs to be, we're talking about mental health here. Get help.
Mhm.
We mentioned, and I'll say this quickly, we mentioned the spiritual aspect, and we have been groomed to believe since forever that just pray about it. But
Mhm.
COVID-19 isn't going to go away. It won't lessen the risk you face when you go into the workplace. So it is not a weakness to get help. You can pray and get help. Those are intertwined. They go very well together.
Mhm.
Uh, you can seek medical attention, mental health. The services are available. Advocate for yourself and get to help to whatever level or degree that you need. You are unique.
Mhm.
You are an individual. Take care of you.
Mhm. Thank you, Ms. Wardine. I want to pose this next question to Dr. Jones, because we know that there are a number of people, of our friends and neighbors, who may feel more alone now than ever, as this pandemic has really forced us into total isolation. And some reports pose that there might be even nearly 30% spike in suicide attempts. What recommendation might you have for us to check in and check on some of our friends and family and our neighbors who might be struggling with mental health at this time?
Clint, great question. I think that if you think about the technology that we have available to us today, we do have Zoom, right? We have FaceTime, um, we have Snapchat, we have Facebook. There's so many media outlets that we can utilize, and I think that if you're a person, for example, that doesn't have that much confidence in technology, I think this is the time to develop confidence in using technology to reach
Mhm.
out to people. Because I think, you know, I don't know what the number is of how many single people are, in the population, but I can probably imagine that there's a significant amount of people that are single. And those are probably the ones that are going to experience heightened levels of anxiety, depression, and things of that nature. And so it's imperative that we get comfortable using these devices, just like we're doing now. This is completely new in terms of how we go about sharing information, and I think it's important that we understand that we understand the significance and the importance of just using technology to reach out to people. Just the other day, some college friends of mine, they were struggling with what was happening in the media with the George Floyd case. And so they said, hey, can we get a Zoom meeting together? It was probably 10 of us, 10, 10 men who sort of had a conversation about what had happened. We wanted to express how we were feeling, what we were thinking, and sort of how we would move forward. So bottom line is that if you're a person that says, hey, I don't talk on the phone, I don't text, I don't use media outlets. I would strongly encourage those individuals to utilize those resources because they are beneficial. That's sort of our new norm and how we reach out to other people. Because what happens is that if you sit in a house and you're continuously being isolated and you're not communicating with people, your anxiety, um, even sadness, sort of turning into depression, that's going to escalate over time. And then the longer that you're isolating yourself and you're not utilizing these resources in terms of communicating with others, it's going to be difficult to recover, right? At some point, we're going to go back to some sense of normalcy. We're not going to be, you know, we're not going to be isolated. We're not going to be confined to our homes. And so those are things to think about is utilizing technology to reach out to people because really that's the new norm. And it's a great source to utilize.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Jones. I want to pose my next question to Ms. Dana and Sylvester, because I want to touch on what you just brought up, Dr. Jones, and that's about George Floyd. And we must say his name. But I want to know, as a member of the Black community, this month has been rough. It's been very rough for us with the issues that all of us have been going through, but especially with this most recent tragedy with George Floyd. So I wanted to ask some of our panelists today, can you please provide us with a few tips on ways that we can cope with this trauma and with this tragedy? I'm going to ask Mr. Liggins to go first, or excuse me, Ms. Dana to go first, and then Mr. Liggins.
Thank you. I think the best thing to do is recognize what has happened. And for me, working with the population of juveniles is being honest with them. And I think for them to understand, their automatic belief is that's going to happen to me. That's what's going to happen. That's how the end of every Black man is. And so I think just recognizing what's going on, give them some explanation, allow them to express their feelings as to how they're feeling about it, what they're thinking about it, making sure that they have an understanding that's based in truth, as opposed to what the media is saying or other people who have no understanding of what it is to be African American in the United States, and let alone be African American and a male. So I think for me and the services I provide and the population I work with, that has been, I have to say, the last couple of days, that has been the talk, and that has been the concerns. And then also that's lessening the anxiety for them, because some are facing leaving incarceration and going back to their community. And some have said, I really am fearful if I go back home, something's going to happen to me because I'm going to end up like Mr. Floyd. And I'm like, no, it won't. It's decisions and understanding. And had one young man said, well, Ms. Simmons, he complied. He didn't fight. He didn't resist. He didn't do anything. He's dead. So what chances do we have? How are we going to be viewed any different than him? And I was lost for words for a moment, because the client, the person welled up with emotion, and they're saying, I've seen the police beat down friends and relatives of mine. And so again, was allowing that person to say how they feel, and then speak, for me, coming from a platform of truth, and giving them some foundational things so that they can start to get a different schema of how life is and who they are in this world. So I think definitely allowing, people that are feeling the stress and the anxiety from this horrific situation to express themselves, and just let them say how they feel, because that's oftentimes the thing that is being bottled up, is our feelings, our thoughts, because we, clients and individuals feel that they're, how they feel is irrelevant. And it's not, that's not the truth. It, you know, it is very much irrelevant because we're all connected.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Miss Dana. And then I want to get to Sylvester, please.
Thank you. Great question. First and foremost, my thoughts and prayers go out to the Floyd family.
Mhm.
And because of that horrific act, we can see firsthand and in real time what secondary trauma looks like.
Mhm.
So I personally believe that we have to be more aware, we have to be more sensitive, and we have to choose in the moment to have courageous conversations with people who don't share the same skin color as us or I. Um, I think there's a difference between description and distinction. And from people who don't share the same skin color as me, I think their description of us is that when they come into our communities, that we're aggressive, we are, um, we know we're animals, we're less than, we're not worthy. However, our distinction is that you're all wrong. And so
Mhm.
I believe that we have to have these courageous conversations and not sugarcoat it and call it exactly what it is. It's wrong and it's just blatantly racism. And if you can't have these courageous conversations and you can't be willing to discuss these conversations by creating a safe environment, then we're going to continue to see horrific acts like this. In addition to that, I believe that there is a lack of mentorship from the African American community. And the reason why I say that is because by creating this platform, we have to be able to make ourselves available to create new and improved experiences for these people who um, justify what the norm is. And so,
Mhm.
with this secondary trauma, when you look at the news, I even see hidden racism with that. They make this out to be a black thing, and it's not. When I see the majority of the people who are looting don't look like me. And so the narrative is, the African American community is upset. Rightfully so, we are. But the truth of the matter is, there are all people upset. I've seen
Mhm.
white people who are looting. I've seen Mexican people standing up saying, Black Lives Matter. The funny thing is, I'm from Michigan, and they had a rally in Bay City, Michigan.
Mhm.
And if anybody knows anything about Bay City, nobody that lives in that community really looked like me. So I was really, really surprised. What I would suggest is that you have to have these courageous conversations with real leadership
Mhm.
and real congressmen and real politicians who affect change. I think a lot of the things that we see today is because of the poor leadership that's up to the top. And so it's an
Mhm.
old saying in the military. I'm a military veteran, Marine. We used to say stuff rolls downhill.
Mhm.
And so if the top isn't effective, then downhill isn't going to be effective also.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Liggins. I know this is a tough subject to talk about. I know we've spoke about it in our family, and we have to see action behind these most recent events. So thank you all for touching on that this morning. I really appreciate it because I know it's a very difficult subject. I know I can get emotional talking about that. I want to ask Miss Wardine just a quick question. One thing that we've seen a spike in is domestic violence, and people have been forced to shelter in place without any movement. Can you provide our audience with any phone numbers or resources that might be helpful if they're going through a traumatic situation?
911 for starters, and that's counterintuitive, I guess, when after the conversation that we just had uh,
Mhm.
about the situation in Minneapolis. Do I call 911? Things are escalating, and my loved one may well be murdered, right? And we needed help.
Mhm.
So, but if your life or or people within your household, the children or whatever, if you are in danger at this time, that You have to get help. You have to get help. And being in close quarters with limited resources, the confusion, the fear. I want to just very quickly mention ACEs, ACE, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So what is happening to children, and all of us were children once, there's a set of 10 experiences, childhood life, you go through these things, and then it drastically increases the likelihood of my being physically ill. So talking about, and I'm going to get with domestic violence is indeed one of the adverse childhood experiences. So if your child is witnessing mom or dad, usually mom, being harmed by someone in our home, and we can't escape from that, that is an adverse childhood experience. It causes angst, and it affects my sleep pattern and eating and all of that. How I socialize or not. So all of us have been home, and kids are in harm's way. They're not getting enough to eat in many instances. They were getting breakfast and lunch at school. So that this is from COVID. We get back to COVID, I guess. The spike in abuse of children. So of course, off the top of my head, I cannot share numbers, but I wish I had the list here. But I'm sure that Clint will post that list of numbers for families to call. The numbers, if I'm feeling that I may even harm myself. But if there is danger in your home, if you're facing that level of danger, you have to call for help. Kids do remember. They see it, they hear it, and it follows them. So the African American community, one of the reasons that we're more susceptible and dying at an alarming rate compared to other populations is the pre-existing conditions. Well, the stress and trauma of watching loved ones being killed by the very people that we pay to keep us safe. You tuck that away, that's in your belly. And if there's abuse, neglect, alcoholism, substance use, all of those things, that self-medicating because of my life circumstance, these systemic issues, matters that we have been fighting, and people have been saying to us, and people, Karen and all them who keep calling and trying to get folks harmed and arrested, have been saying, no, it's fair. The system is fair. I want to, to the young people who are expressing their anger with the protests and burning buildings, burn systems. One of my friends said earlier this week, burn a system, set it ablaze, speak truth to power, stand there and with your signs or whatever, but burn systems instead of the buildings that grandma needs to get back to for groceries or whatever. So, but that anger, it is very real, it is justified, and it has to go somewhere, or it turns inward and we cause harm to the people closest to us. So Clint I will share with you, and he will certainly share a list of numbers and organizations that you can contact. But of course, Saginaw County Community Mental Health Authority, if you and or loved ones are experiencing or even wondering about the level of anxiety or sadness that has set into your home during this period or before, there are numbers to call. There is help available to you, and Clint will share that information.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Wardine. We will make sure that we put those in the comment section below, so we can use those as a resource if you so need. But I wanted to pose a question to Ms. Simmons about education, about our students, because I'm a former substitute teacher, and education is a top priority for me. And the students that I used to teach are always on my mind. But I just wanted to hear from you, Miss Dana. Going through this pandemic and the trauma associated with it that our students and parents are facing, what are some things that we can do to support them?
Well, definitely listen to their thoughts and feelings, because if they're not able to express how they feel and what they're thinking, that will impede whether or not they're learning. So keeping an open forum and keeping a format that allows that child to express themselves, because it's a different learning environment altogether for them, because they're accustomed to going to school, being with their friends, being with their teachers, and now you have mom and dad, or the caregivers providing some level of education for them. And it's another perspective that child has to take on. The other thing for me, where I work, the educational component as well has been a concern as well too, because they do theirs, just like what everyone else is, remotely through the TV, through the computer, and so on. And that also affects how juveniles that are incarcerated, they learn as well too, because they're already have certain things that they're there for, and then to have this be another thing added to them that throws them off of their balance, their homeostasis from what they're accustomed to, it does affect them. So it's something that we need to be conscientious and cognizant of what's happening with that young person, and then whether or not that they're learning, because again, like Miss Tally indicated, their life experiences and what they see go on around them do affect them, and it affects how they interpret information and how they utilize that information.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Simmons. I have a question for Dr. Jones and Mr. Liggins. I want to pose this first to Dr. Jones and then ask Mr. Liggins if he would follow up, because I want to talk about veterans' mental health. I believe that it's too often that we forget about our veterans who return home without the care that they need. So what can we do to help support them? And what do you think is needed for veterans who might suffer from mental illness?
Well, I think one, we need to make sure that they do know what services are available. Um, when you think about veterans, some that have actually fought in war or have been deployed, um, they may have a dislike towards the mental health system, not realizing, sort of projecting previous experiences onto what they perceive might be negative in terms of the experiences that they'll get at a mental health institution. So I think it's important to make sure that, hey, um, you know, these resources are available. Um, Although we may not necessarily understand your experiences, but we're willing to listen and we're willing to help. And so I think that's the important part. You don't have to be deployed or you don't have to be a veteran to completely understand what they're going through, but just being empathetic to, the residual impact that COVID-19, all the things that we're seeing in the social media might be having on them. Because when you think about veterans, oftentimes you may have veterans who, at some point in time, they were going through some type of mental health treatment and decided to drop out because they felt it wasn't effective, or people didn't quite understand what their experiences are. And so we have to be mindful of that because they have this unresolved trauma, that trauma might increase, with all the stuff that's happening today, and just being aware of that, and directing them to the resources that they need. The Veterans Hospital in Saginaw is a very good source. The other part of that too would be there are mental health providers who take TRICARE. TRICARE is a primarily military insurance. Most veterans do have TRICARE, and so even letting veterans know that these agencies do take TRICARE insurances, and I think that's important. But even having someone that's they have an understanding of how to work with veterans, understanding things that they've experienced and the things that they've been through is significantly important. They want you to listen, and then they want to know that there are resources that are available to them, and that they're not going to be harmed. There's not going to be any additional harm that's going to come with it. And so I think those are the key things that we need to understand in order to help our veterans.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. Sylvester.
Yeah, this question is really, really passionate, to me because I am a veteran, and I agree with Dr. Jones by making sure that our veterans know about resources.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I believe that we have to um, become that veteran just for a split moment, feeling any pain, any joy, without pushing our personal agenda onto theirs. And the way that we do that is meet them where they are. And we have to be willing to provide counseling or therapy in a total different way. Not one of those things where, you talk. I mean, I'll sit and talk and I'll listen while you talk. You have to be willing to take a supportive reflection approach. At Guided Grace, what we've done was we went out and done research on how to provide counseling for people who have challenges with like PTSD
Mm-hmm.
or depression. So we invested in what is called virtual reality, VR. And what that is these are virtual reality goggles where veterans can um, put on these goggles and simulate trauma in real time. And so in that real time, what we can do is we'll continue to provide services and continue to provide this virtual reality where the trauma becomes common virtue. Means that it doesn't have the same sting as it once did before. Almost like being in a relationship where you had your husband who continues to be mean to you, and the first time that husband was mean to you, you probably would cry. But if he did that 100 times, you don't cry anymore. It's like, hey, it's just common. This is the way that it is. And so what we've done was invested in better technology. And in fact, at Guided Grace is probably one of the only companies in our area that has invested in this virtual reality. So what we do is we make ourselves available to our VA centers. We have open and effective communication with them. Our company also takes TRICARE um, insurances. So that way we can make ourselves available for those veterans who may be struggling with those challenges. But not only veterans, but with any client that has challenges with PTSD. I always found it fascinating that you can take two people, they can experience the same thing, and one can have trauma and the other can't. And so what we have to do is be more aware of that person by having those courageous conversations or open and effective communication, with those ones who's been placed in harm's way. There's a study that's been shown with, the collapse of the buildings of 9/11. That the long-term effect was way more significant than the initial effects. So that's my thought on providing those services for veterans.
Thank you so much for that. That was amazing for talking about the opportunity and resources that are out there. Now, I do have some audience questions that have come in, and I want to encourage everyone who's listening to go ahead and continue to put those comments and questions in. We do have a YouTube comment from Carone, and it says, honest mentorship in conversations about what they can do to be a part of the change. Thank you so much, Carone, for that, because that's exactly what we're talking about today, honest mentorship and how we can help out our neighbors and friends through the next few weeks. I see Jerome. Sorry, it was a typo. It's Jerome Buckley. Thank you, Jerome, for that question. We have another question that has come in, and it talks about what are the signs that I might need help? That's an audience question. I'm going to ask if we can get Miss Wardine to answer that one. What are some of the signs that an individual might need help?
Question. Perhaps your eating habits have changed.
Mhm.
Either I'm eating more or less. My appetite has changed for most of us right now. And I think it's interesting that, for some, the most challenging thing that we have right now is whether we're going to be able to fit our clothes when we get back into the workplace. But for some, that won't be a problem because there wasn't enough to eat that would cause the weight gain. So you're sleeping. I can't sleep at night, or I can't get up in the morning. So, there are extremes with anything. I find myself easily agitated, more so than I was before. The children walking through the room used to, just be music to my ears. They're up this morning, and now I'm feeling like, here they come again, and that. So those any drastic changes in your attitude, your temperament, your ability to sleep, find peace. I'm crying all the time, and I can't quite put my finger on it. That's those adverse childhood experiences, that stuff that we've tucked away and it's packed in there and we haven't dealt with it. So we can't really identify it. I just know there's something wrong, this sense of this impending sense of there's something bad about to happen. And guess what? Something did. There is a virus in the air. That's a reality. There was a flood in Michigan. On top of that, there are killer hornets. They haven't made it to Michigan yet, I guess, but our children are hearing about all of these calamities, these things, and there are police officers choking the life out of people who look like me. These are realities. So if I can offer a remedy, if you will, consider the source of information. If you turn the television on first thing in the morning to the news and you just hear that, just run over and over. I edit for one of our local community newspapers, and there was a line in one of the stories. You'll see it when it's out, where he said, I don't want to watch this, but I watch it over and over and over again, right? You just can't take your eyes off it, like driving by an accident. Consider the amount of information, the negative information that's coming in. You have to have balance, not just for yourself, but for the children. And I have to keep going back to the needs of the children. They aren't asleep when they go to their room. They hear the news. They hear us on the telephone. And now with the Zoom and the Skype and Sylvester, you mentioned, no, I think it was Dr. Jones, the technology. I'm one of those persons who is challenged with technology. So my phone is on too loud and they can hear me from the back room. Be very mindful of those sensitive ears, how much they can hear. Explain to them, answer the questions. Dana said earlier, be honest, tell them the truth, but temper it, make it age appropriate. So I hope I answered that. Any extremes? I used to be here and now I'm there. You have to have balance, and you will know when you're off your square and off your A game that maybe I need to see someone, maybe I need to seek professional help.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Wardine. Let's go to Ms. Dana. We had a viewer that had asked a question. What are some of the signs that I may need help?
I'll go along with what Ms. Tally had indicated. There's change in your normal schedule, change in your normal behavior. Behavior tells a lot. Behavior communicates more than the spoken, because there are oftentimes, and we're creatures of behaviors. So when that behavior is interrupted, and it's interrupted to a point, it's impacting your daily function and your ability to function on a daily basis, then that's when that's a strong indicator to self that something's wrong. But oftentimes in a crisis situation, you're not paying attention to self, because it's all the external things that's going on around you. And others may see something in you and bring something to your attention that something's going on. And, we're sensitive, we're hypersensitive to what's happening now. So a lot of times we don't listen to those people that are closest to us, and even the ones that are furthest from us. They see something, and, And I would suggest to those individuals close and far to say something if you see something, different from an individual, because again, we may not always see what's happening with ourselves, where others on the outside were able to, see it. And I would say to the individual, when the information comes to you, receive it, step back, examine it, think about it, and accept it. And then if you need to seek out help, definitely don't hesitate to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Dana. The next question I want to pose to Dr. Jones, and it's about access to telehealth. We know that this is a strange time we're working in right now, but that's a question I wanted to pose to Dr. Jones about telehealth and any opportunities that might be out there to help improve access, especially when it comes to cost as well.
Yeah, so I think that when you think about telehealth, it's a concept that's been around for maybe the last 10 years, but people may not necessarily understand what telehealth is. It's sort of like distance therapy or counseling, so to speak. And so some people would rather come into an office directly, and some people would prefer to get help in the privacy of their own home. And so if you look at just a little bit of background information, the effectiveness of telehealth in terms of the data over the years has shown that it's effective. It's just as effective as receiving services at a physical location. And so I just want to make sure I share that first and foremost. Secondly, there are one specific platform, Psychology Today. It just provide a list of individuals who are licensed and certified in various types of treatment or therapy, where they also offer telehealth or virtual sort of reality online services. And so it's effective, it's accessible, it's private. Typically, if you, for example, if you use Guided Grace, for example, Guided Grace covers every major insurance carrier. And so most of the time what you find is that you don't have to necessarily come out of pocket to pay for these services. The insurances will pay for it. Or if there is a copay, copays are typically minimum at best. So there's not a lot of costs associated with telehealth. I think the issue though is that for those who's been hesitant to seek help in a traditional setting, may even be more hesitant to seek help in a virtual setting or through telehealth. But you must allow yourself to open up to want to receive those services or to want to pursue those services because they are important. Even more so today, just because most agencies are closed. And so telehealth right now, it's probably going to increase as we move forward, as we come out of this COVID-19, this pandemic. It's probably going to increase even more. And so what I would just tell people is that it's effective. You can pick and choose who you want to provide services to you, the type of therapist you're looking for. And so be mindful and be cognitive of that. And Sylvester can probably speak more to what Guided Grace has to offer in terms of telehealth services moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Mr. Liggins, can you give us some information about telehealth and access?
Yeah. Some of the platforms that we use at Guided Grace is we use Zoom. Everybody knows Zoom. And we use also a company that's called Doxy.me. Doxy.me is really, really easy to use because the person that's receiving the services doesn't have to download like an app or download the channel to allow you to come into the telehealth room. So that makes it really, really easy for clients that, who's looking for telehealth services. The easy part is you can send them a text or you can send them an email and they just click on the link and then they'll start receiving services. I won't add too much what Dr. Jones said, but the only thing I would say in addition is that when it comes to telehealth, for clients who's seeking to look for services, it's almost like they get to look at like a resume. where, before they would just go to like a doctor and say, hey, I'm looking to, get my knee checked or whatever. But this, they can get to look at resumes. They can pick and choose what therapists that they want. And these therapists can be all over the country. So they can, sift through these, resumes or applications to try and seek out the best counselor that fits their needs. And so I would say that, here at Guided Grace, what we do is we pride ourselves on having a safe environment. And so with telehealth, not only you have a safe environment at Guided Grace, but you have that safe environment, within your own home or your own bedroom. And I've seen that, from those services from telehealth, that clients are more apt to share the most important information in the moment. So I would suggest, if there's anybody who's listening out there that may have those questions, I would ask first for them to look in 3 areas. I would ask them to look within their social component. I would ask them to look in their physical component, as well as their mental component. And then I would suggest that they critique themselves as hard as they'll critique others when they're looking for those services.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I do want to encourage all of our listeners to go ahead and put your comments, questions, and concerns in the chat feature, and we will get to them as soon as possible. But I want to ask Ms. Dana and all of our panelists, what are 2 tangible things that should be our top priority when it comes to increasing access and resources to mental health services?
Well, definitely, if you don't know, definitely ask a question. There's somebody that, will know top things, 2 top things. When it comes to accessing, I would just say, basically, if you're the person that know they need, just, ask what, ask around. And there's enough. And Ms. Tally has given the information to, community mental health, and then you have Guided Grace, and there's other agency within our community as well. So I would definitely say, seek out the things that you need, and be open to the services that's going to be provided. I think seek and be open, because that's what's going to start that change and that flow of change for you. So that's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Let's go to Dr. Jones. What are 2 tangible things that should be our top priority when it comes to increasing access and resources for mental health services?
So I think that for me, one of the top priorities, it's more interpersonal, is knowing that you need help, right? I think most people believe that they're so resilient that they don't necessarily need help, and the coping strategies that they were using are going to continue to be effective. So I think the first thing, from an interpersonal level, is saying to yourself, I know that I need help. You know that you need help when the coping strategies that you've been using are ineffective in new situations and even older situations, right? And so I think that's the first and foremost thing. The second thing is, you want to ask yourself is, what type of help do I need, right? So we know we need mental health services, but what is it that I'm looking to accomplish? What's the goal of me seeking help? And so you have to be very sort of specific about what type of help are you looking for. And I think if you can identify the type of help that you're looking for, then you'll be able to identify the service or the provider that you need to be able to help you. If you're dealing with depression and you're an adult, you're probably going to want to work with someone that sort of specializes in dealing with depression or dealing with anxiety, and typically work with adults. If you're a parent that's seeking help for your children or for your child, you're probably going to look for someone who specializes in working with children. And so that's important. You don't want to access someone who is a provider who 95% of the time work with adults, and maybe they spent 5% working with children, that may not necessarily be a good match. So you want to look for someone or provider or an agency that sort of caters to specific population, age group, and then whatever uh, issues or concerns that they're sort of experiencing and treating, that's sort of what you want to look for.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Let's go to Mr. Liggins from a policy perspective. Looking at public policy and law, what are some of the things that we can do, some tangible things that we can do to increase access and resources for mental health services?
I think that's a great question. Uh, First and foremost, I think one of the things that we have to do is bring awareness to uh, the African American community, and then have those conversations about the stigmas that's attached um, to mental health services, in general.
Mhm.
Because one of the things that I found out is that, in the African American community, mental health services trust has been broken. And it goes all the way back to, the Tuskegee experiment, where um, oh, African Americans was believed that they were uh, receiving medication because they, may had a common cold, but they were being injected with syphilis. And so that trust has been broken. And it even goes, to where women were going, African American women were just having uh, basic examinations, and they'll leave with a full hysterectomy. So what we have to do is take a psychoeducational approach and educate them on, the importance of mental health services. And to be frank, honestly with you, have more people that look like myself going into those communities, providing some of those services. Because what I found out was I worked in some of those areas. I used to work for a crisis team, and I would go out and de-escalate big behaviors in the evening. And some of my partners who didn't look like me will go into communities where I was from, and it may be a mother who's doing the best that she can with the tools that she um, have challenges, within her home. And let's say a kid may be sleeping on a pallet. Now the pallet may be made up, really, really nice in the corner, but that's our culture. That's our environment. And the people who didn't look like me felt like that kid needed to be removed. And so it was barriers or that was broken, and trust that was broken. So what we have to do is restore hope by telling them the truth and having more counselors and therapists that look like us, that will go in, that can understand, our population, that talk like us, that looks like us, that understands our culture like us, so that they can trust, medication management, or they can trust, a CBT approach. They can trust a exploitation of an emotions approach. And what I found out is that once you're able to do that, you start getting more referrals. Families start to trust you, and mental health isn't one of those stigmas of the past.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let's get to Miss Wardine. Just briefly, I want to be cognizant of everyone's afternoon now, but I just wanted to ask those questions from a policy standpoint. What can we do to help provide resources and access to mental health services?
Okay, this is going to, it's a quantum leap, but what if this group, these brilliant minds gathered here today, right, were to come together and develop a program, submit a proposal, a grant, and receive $1 gazillion into this community to help build and grow. So I think from a policy standpoint, we get on boards and we speak truth to power, and we affect change to the best of our ability. But I have heard from each of you today, that to put together something awesome. Guided Grace already has a building. So just this team were to come together. But just really quickly, I'd like to remove some of the mystery surrounding telehealth. So if y'all would put Sylvester back on the screen. This is Ward D. This is Mrs. Talley, and I'm calling Guided Grays. And you know, there's some things going on in my home right now, and my kids are acting up, and with all this COVID stuff, we don't know what to do. What would your response be to me? Because it's gonna look just like we look right now, our faces on a screen when we have this conversation. So, Mr. Liggins, I am calling your organization. What would your response be to me right now?
Well, first and foremost, I would ask them to take me where they want to go.
No, do
And
real,
the
be real,
biggest
be
thing,
real, be Sylvester.
I am,
My
I
name is
am.
Mrs. Talley. I have a problem in my home. How can you help?
Take me where would you like to go? Give me more information. Give me the most important information so that I can link you up with a therapist. It might be myself. It might be another therapist that will fit the need, or be a perfect fit for the person who's actually calling me and that's seeking services. So yeah.
Therapy. I don't know if I trust you guys with therapy. We've tried that before, and all you did was try to put us on medication and stuff. I don't know. How can you help me, sir?
Um, so if they call it, well, we are therapeutic services, but as an agency, what we do is we have other services out in the area. If you can give me more information about what's going on with you, I'd probably be able to link you up or partner with another agency that will be able to provide the needs that you're actually looking for.
Okay, and I did that, Clint, intentionally because I know
Mm-hmm.
Sylvester and Nicole, it's the real deal. Your needs are going to be met, and they're going to be honest with you on during this telehealth situation. This time that our
Mm-hmm.
choices are limited. If they don't have it in house, they're going to be certain that you find it, that you're connected with the right organization. Dr. Jones mentioned if I need help for my child and you give me someone who works with seniors primarily, we're going to miss the mark. So that was sort of a plug for Guided Grace. It's the real deal. And they will work with you, connect with you. So in your question in terms of policy, some of us, brilliant minds, with folks whose needs uh, have just gone unmet and unaddressed so that their voices are also heard. Create something of our own. Guided Grace did that. There are organizations all over town. Create something for people who look like you, be it Black, brown, whatever, who look like you, who understand you, have similar life experiences, and then let's grow. Let's rebuild our community. So we're burning systems instead of buildings. Burn those systems and recreate policy, procedure, and that lend it's how that helps to build and helps us to grow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Miss Wardine. And thank you to each of our panelists, Dr. Jones, Miss Simmons, and Mr. Liggins. Thank you guys for joining us today as we have to talk about this issue, create more awareness. So I am so thankful to each of our panelists who have joined us today. And I want to encourage you, if you do have other questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out. There are many other things that you could have been doing today, but you tuned into our live discussion today, Coffee with Clint, discussing mental health issues in our community. If you would like to look more at our policy agenda, especially when it comes to mental health services, and we know that social workers are our lifeblood in this community. So we have some very special policy that we have drafted. So go ahead and go to clintbryant.com for more information. But you can also text Clint to 22999. For our Spanish speaking folks, you can visit our website at es.clintbryant.com. There you'll find our website translated into Spanish. But also, I wanted to let our folks know in the community that you can always follow me on all social media platforms at Clint Bryant MI. That's at Clint Bryant MI on your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on all your social media platforms. Please connect with us because we have so much more in store. So, on another note, I just want to encourage all of our listeners and let them know that yard signs are in. Go to clintbryant.com/yard sign. There you can order a yard sign, and we will make sure that a member of Team Bryant gets out in your yard so you can show your support. And I am so thankful for the overwhelming support that we have been receiving over the last few weeks and months. You know that we are committed to propelling our district and moving it forward. So I'm just so thankful. Good afternoon, everyone. Have a good day. And thank you so much for tuning in to our discussion, Coffee with Clint. We'll see you soon.